All right. Well, I'm so glad to be here speaking with you guys. Like Tony said, my name is Zach. If I haven't met you before, I am a student right here at Radiant Church's college, Iowa Leadership College. I'm studying ministry. If that is something interesting to you, come talk to me afterward because I love what I do. I'm also part of our middle school group that is here, so I'm not down here quite as much, but I get the chance to speak tonight. So I'm honored to be here. Let's get into it. Before we get really started here, you guys mind if I share a story with you? There's a story from Monday that doesn't really tie into my message, but I just had to share it. So me and Brecken, raise your hand. That's right. Me and Brecken went out to eat on Monday night. We had a great talk. We were just going through doing a Bible study, a little apprenticeship. And right about halfway through our meal, we're at Chipotle, out in public, sitting center on the table, and we're in the middle of our talk, we're starting to talk about like shame, how we deal with it, like ways that we overcome it. And right in the middle of this really deep talk, this probably 16, 17-year-old guy walks by our table, and he says, "Hey, boys, happy Valentine's Day. Hope you're enjoying your date." And I say, "Thank you." And he keeps walking, and I was like, that was an experience. And then he turns around, and he comes back, and he's like, "So what are you guys talking about? What you reading?" And I thought Brecken knew this guy. Brecken's never met this man in his life. I don't know who he is. And I'm like, Jesus. I show him our journal that we're going through, and he's like, oh, you're talking about Jesus. That's cool. And then again, I thought he was going to walk away. But then 4 of his buddies come over, and now there's a huddle of these high school guys that are standing around our little table in Chipotle, and they're saying, "Oh, what you guys reading? What you talking about?" And I'm like, Jesus. We're just talking about Jesus. And these guys are sitting there just playing with us, messing around, and I'm like, "Hey, pull up a chair. We'd love to have you. Come join our conversation." And so they did. And so Monday night in Chipotle, it's me and Brecken and 4 strangers we've never met that are sitting there talking about Jesus. And we start asking these guys, like, where you go to high school. Brecken's talking to them about what kind of church do you go to. Talking about, oh, my family's Catholic. I don't love church, but I love God. But I don't know. And they just start talking about what they're doing with their lives. And then finally one of them is like, all right, this isn't fun anymore. Like, we got to get up to go. And we stop them, and we're like, hey, we just so happen to be part of a youth group that's called Radiant Church. I don't know if you ever heard of it, off Blair's Ferry Road. It's a pretty good time. You guys should come join us sometime. And one of the guys turns around. He's like, you know what? I went there a couple years ago. I might show up sometime. So I just wanted to share that story because there's this ridiculous moment where a kid turns around trying to poke fun and trying to have a fun I don't even know what he was trying to do, but it turned out that God orchestrated this moment that we got to have a deeper conversation. And I just want to shout out Brecken being able to actually represent Jesus, what we're trying to do, right? We're not just seeing these guys that are coming in and poking fun and just pushing them away, but Jesus invites them in, invites them to sit down and talks to them. So I want to shout you out. I want to shout out that crazy experience we shared on Monday. And so that's going to go right into what is our word of the year? Represent. That's right. Represent. Our verse is that in everything you say or do it as a representative of Jesus. And because of that, right now we're going to be talking about the book of John. I believe this is week 3 that we're talking about the Gospel of John, because John's gospel is all about who Jesus is. And remember, you cannot represent someone that you don't know. You can't represent someone you don't know who they are. So, I'm going to recap a little bit here. What we learned week 1, I believe, we talked about how Jesus is the Word, right? Jesus is the Word because when God created, He spoke everything into existence. It was His spoken word through which things were created. And Jesus, it was also through Him that all things that exist were made. Through everything that exists, it was made through Jesus. We also learned Jesus is the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it, right? That was all week 1. And then last week, we also got to talk about how when we receive Jesus, we are children of God. That was last week. We're children of God. So starting off today, we're going to be in John 1:14, the very next verse where we left off, John 1:14. And while you guys are turning your Bibles there, I want to invite you just into this experience that I want to have tonight. I want you to take a minute and just think about Jesus as if it's your very first time thinking about him. As you're turning your Bibles, I want you to stop and read and consider the gospel as if you've never heard it before. Because I think that Jesus deserves us to be in awe of him every single time we think about him. I think he deserves that. So with that in mind, verse 14, it says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." All right, that verse is a lot to unpack. We're going to take it step by step. First off, we know Jesus is the Word, but Jesus and the Word is also God. 2 weeks ago, John 1:1, very first verse in the Gospel of John, it says, "The Word was God." And now we're reading that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. So again, like it's our very first time thinking about it, I want us to consider that God came down to earth, was wrapped in flesh, and walked among us. Creator, Jesus who is the light, Jesus who is through whom everything was made, Jesus who has life, was wrapped in flesh and walked among us. I don't know about you, but when I think about that, I'm just in awe. Continuing on, it says that we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son. And so I want to explain, we learned last week that when we receive Jesus, we become sons of God, right? But this is saying that Jesus is God's one and only Son. And so I want to explain that the Greek word for only right here, the Greek word for only is not saying that Jesus is the exclusive Son of God, but it means unique. Jesus is the unique Son of God. So we share in that relationship when we have Jesus. But there is something different about Jesus. There's something different about that Son. All right, and at the very end of that verse, it says that Jesus' glory is full of grace and truth. All right, does anyone know what the definition of grace is? We're going to make this a interactive sermon tonight. Anyone know what the definition of grace is? Anyone? Come on. Okay, anyone who has their best guess about what the definition of grace is? What do you think? It's absolutely right. Grace is receiving something we don't deserve. Thank you for that answer. All right, so an example of grace. I got an awesome story of when I received grace. Last week, I woke up for work. Work is supposed to start at 5:15, and I got there at about 6:20 because my alarm was set for PM instead of AM. So when I showed up to work, I was like, "Hey, I'm really sorry." And they showed me grace, where instead of writing me up, they just laughed at me. And that was, I deserved a write-up, and instead I received laughter. They showed me grace. All right. John is deciding that grace and truth are the two best words to describe Jesus. Remember, this gospel is all about who Jesus is. That's why John is writing. Grace and truth are the best words to describe Jesus. But you know what I learned that is fascinating? In John's gospel, in all of the chapters of John's gospel, the word truth or true is used 49 times. 49 times. But you want to know, the word grace is never again used in John's gospel outside of this verse and the next 4 verses. Jesus is grace, but in his own gospel, that word is never used again. Why? I think it's because John chose to use examples of Jesus' life as evidence of his grace. John had to describe Jesus' words as truth, but his grace was so evident in how he lived. And students, I like to think that if we're called to live like Jesus, if we're going about this next year and we actually want to represent something, I'm going to challenge you to live out grace. You don't need someone to speak that over you. You don't need a shout out on stage to say, "Hey, I see you, you have grace." You need to live it out. That's what Jesus did. Here's the reality. Our society is full of people showering people with grace after grace without ever sharing the truth. And that's how we have to share grace. Society will say, hey, chase your passions. Do what you think is right. Do what makes you feel good, right? Go and follow your heart. I think that's the most toxic thing you can say to someone is follow your heart. For me, as someone who's studying ministry and is being around the church a lot, I'm just noticing my sin more and more, and it can be exhausting for me. And in that, I can have a desire to seek out people to try to find friends that are only going to affirm what I'm doing, right? I can go and look for people that will be like, hey, it's okay, you're trying, right? Or it's okay, you messed up, but God still loves you, don't change. But like Tony mentioned earlier, I made a decision when I came here that I'm not going to sit in my sin. I am not going to continue down this path of darkness. I'm going to find someone, which is Tony, and tell him what is inside of me that is crap. Because grace without truth is mean. Sorry, truth without grace is mean. Grace without truth is meaningless. But truth with grace is medicine. Truth without grace is mean. Grace without truth is meaningless. But truth with grace is medicine. All right, we're going to move on to the next verse because I think John the Baptist, not the author, John the Baptist does a great job of this. Verse 15 says that John testified concerning him. He cried out saying, hey, this is the one I spoke about when I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me. This is the one I spoke about. John in this verse is excited. You know why he's excited? Because he knows someone that is finally coming into his group, into his people. It's kind of like if you ever have that friend that goes to a different school that no one else knows. And your friend group at school is hearing story after story of, bro, we went out, we were driving last week, and then there was this deer that crossed the road, and he swerved, and he saved my life. You got a crazy story. Maybe you're saying that you were at the store, and you were at Chipotle with this guy, and some strangers came up to you, right? And no one knows Brecken, but I got this crazy story about Brecken. John's got some crazy stories about Jesus because he knows him and he loves him. And finally, Jesus is showing himself to people. And John's like, hey, I know that guy. That's who I was talking about. That is exactly how we are supposed to represent Jesus. You are supposed to be sharing stories, sharing your relationship with them, sharing your personal time with them, so that when people are revealed to him, when Jesus finally comes into people's lives, you can be the one that's like, guys, that's him. This is who I've been talking about this whole time. Be like John. John valued the truth in representing Jesus. He valued the truth. Verse 16. Talking about Jesus. Out of his fullness, we have all received grace in place of grace already given. Right here, John is clarifying that Jesus is not 1/3 of God. All right? I want us to grasp that tonight. Jesus is not 1/3 of God. We know that there's the Father, there's the Son, who is Jesus, and there's the Holy Spirit. Jesus is not 1/3 who is incomplete apart from the other two. Right here, John is saying that Jesus is the fullness of God. And I want us to understand that because that means that when Jesus came to earth, when he walked, when he touched people, when he died on the cross, that wasn't just a part of God. That was the fullness of God that died on a cross for you. And I don't think we understand the weight of that. It was the fullness of the one who created you that then died on a cross for you. Keys, you can come up at this time. And in that fullness, we receive grace in place of grace. We're going to expand on that in a second. Verse 17. We receive grace in place of grace, for the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Here's what that's saying. It's saying that the law that we received was gracious enough, right? In the Old Testament, maybe you've read or heard that God has given us laws. He's given us commands and things to follow. He's given us rules. And these rules are not just meant to keep us from living the life we desire, right? But the purpose of God's rules is so that we can encounter him. It's so we can encounter him. And other grace, you guys, the law, the rules are grace. Other grace that we've been given free will. We've been given emotions. We've been given passions and dreams, the ability to love. We've been given relationships. All of these things are meant to point us back to Jesus. But none of them are enough. Because every time, you guys, every time we try to love our way, we try to have passion our way, we pervert it, we break it, we turn it into darkness. And so that grace, unfortunately, was never enough for us because we just can't receive it. But then Jesus. But in Jesus, who died on the cross, we receive grace on top of that grace. We already have rules. We already have our emotions. We have our free will. But Jesus dying on the cross layers grace upon the grace so that when we distort it, when we pervert the grace that we've received, we have something else every single time. Verse 18, it says, "No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." With Jesus' grace, what is it that we receive? What is his grace that is going on top of one another? In my example, it was getting a laugh instead of a write-up at work. That was my grace I received. But Jesus' grace is forgiveness. Jesus' grace is forgiveness so that we can be with God. You guys, every day, we get the grace of the law. We get the grace of our emotions and our free will. And we are covered every time we mess up. That's what sin is. Sin is messing up and separating yourself from God. And we get covered by Jesus every time. If I can summarize this message in one sentence, I want you to remember this. The greatest truth and the greatest grace is that Jesus carries us to God so that we can be with him now and after death forever. Jesus carries us to God so that we can be with him right now and after death for eternity. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Leaders, can I have you guys line the sides right now? All right, what I want us to do, I'm kind of changing my mind a little bit here, what I was planning. We were talking a little bit earlier about what it is to confess, to get things off your chest. If you guys know what the Beatitudes are, one of them says that those who have a pure heart, they shall see the Lord. And I don't know about you guys, but after reading this, after hearing about the grace upon the grace upon the grace that Jesus has to offer me, I just want to see God. Because that's what Jesus died for. He died so that you can see God. But you can't do that without a pure heart. And so for me, I know that there's things that I will sometimes carry that I need to speak. Things you need to get off your chest. And so we're going to be going back into a time of worship. And there's going to be two types of people in this room. Everyone is going to get a chance to respond. All right, number one, maybe you're a type of person that you're hearing this and you just got a hunger for more of Jesus. Maybe you're hearing this and you're like, I never understood the fullness of Jesus dying for me. I never understood that God loved me so much that he died for me. And if you just want more of Jesus tonight, I'm going to invite you up to the front in a second, and you're just getting a chance to worship. Maybe you're in this room, and you can't receive the gospel, or you can't receive all of Jesus right now because there's something in your heart that you haven't yet shared. I believe that some of you in this room have something that is keeping you from receiving Jesus. And I don't want that for you. Okay, our leaders here don't want that for you. God does not want that for you. And if you want to experience God, you need to get that off your heart. So either you're going to come up here to worship tonight, going to get to receive Jesus. Or maybe you need to go and find a leader. And you need to confess some things to them to get something off your heart so that you can actually experience God. All right, I'm going to count to 3. Invite you guys up to the front or to the side. 1, 2, 3. Take that time to respond.